A federal judge rules the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional.
Wendy Patrick joining us now for today's Inside the Law. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning.
A lot of people hear this, they start to panic, excuse me, and then do they sign up? Do they not sign up? The deadline is what does this ruling mean?
Well, they should continue to sign up because this ruling is not going to change anything because there's an appellate process that we have to go through, and we all know that the wheels of justice often turn slowly, particularly when you're dealing with something that is so important, really to both sides. I mean, healthcare is a non-partisan issue, but you're right. Many people, when they're turning on their television sets or opening the newspaper and hearing that health care has been struck down, I mean, that sounds like the end of the world to almost everyone.
Yeah.
Not to fear, this obviously is being appealed, but it's curious that many are waking up and saying, wait a minute, why would the Republicans necessarily want this to happen? Why isn't the Trump administration defending it? Why did they call it a victory? It becomes very confusing. In fact, I think the president said it best once when he was talking about the tax plan. It's complicated. The same could be said for the Affordable Care Act.
If there is anyone who I think can uncomplicate things, and I always say that if you were my law school professor, I would have probably finished law school, uncomplicate it for us. What does that mean for people who are watching and they see all this stuff and it is confusing?
It is. So, Shali, just in a nutshell, the provision at issue was we did away with the individual mandate. Congress did. Remember, it was upheld because it was considered a tax. Well, when Congress got rid of the individual mandate penalty, there's going to be no more penalty as of January 2019, the court basically said, well, that invalidates the entire law. But there's something called the provision of severability, meaning you can sever, a court could, the provision of the law that's offensive, that's being challenged, but really keep the rest in place.
Keep the other.
Right, and that's what Congress did last year. Nobody wants Americans to be without health care. Remember that the president ran on repeal and replace, not just repeal and not do anything. Congress actually was looking at, well, if this law were to be invalidated, how could we make sure that pre-existing conditions would still be covered and all the other things that people liked about the Affordable Care Act.
And you were speaking of repeal. I'm speaking of appeal because it seems like we're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Is this going to see an appeal, and ultimately are we headed to the Supreme Court?
Yes, great questions, Raul. I'm glad you asked. Yes, it'll be headed to the Fifth Circuit, but here's the interesting twist as it makes its way to the Supreme Court. If the Fifth Circuit, for example, doesn't strike down what happened in Texas but upholds it, by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, I mean, we have two justices there that may retire soon. We have Breyer, who's 80 years old, not that that's old. Ginsburg, that's 85. Again, not old, that's the age of my mother. But who's to say they don't want to do something else and spend the rest of their years on the court? So if they're gone and the president has two more conservative justices appointed, that may change the constitution of the court. But even then, nobody wants to see millions of Americans without health care or even to be disenfranchised by a system that doesn't work. So I think this is going to light a fire to get Congress to work together to come up with a replacement.
You think so?
I hope so. Wow. I know it's been since 2010, but you know me, I'm the eternal optimist. Maybe this is the time.
You're maybe a little too optimistic about this because I feel like we're always going back and forth with the health care. Everybody has, they're different. You really think that there's going to be a fix to this?
I think this lights a fire in the sense that nobody saw it coming. Nobody expected, and I say nobody expected. It's almost like be careful what you wish for or what you advocate for, because once you get it, you have to scramble to come up with a replacement. And they'll have that time as it winds its way through the courts.
Okay, so give me a timeline, because for the common person, and all they wanted to be able to go see their doctor. They're not involved in the politics of this and the government hands involved. What's the time frame here? And do we just sit back and go about our daily lives, sign up again, and do that while this plays out?
Yes, because the law remains in place.
Because we need to calm people down when they hear this, they don't know.
Absolutely. The law remains in place as it is as this decision is appealed. It's not one of those decisions that automatically revokes everything. So business as usual.
So status quo for now.
Status quo for now, absolutely, but we're going to keep an eye on it. And behind the scenes, we're going to try to actually now repeal and replace, going to make do on that.
Well, that's the key, because you figure when this all plays out, you can't just take it away. You need to have a plan in place to come in.
You need a plan B ready to go, Raul.
Oh,
Amen.
Wendy Patrick.
That made you thirsty.
Oh, I had to take a drink after that one.
Need more coffee to talk about this subject, that's for sure.
Thank you as always for your expertise.
All right, 7:22 now coming up.